And joining us here in Los Angeles, CNN law enforcement contributor Steve Moore, counterterrorism expert and editor of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari, and Josh Lockman, a lecturer in international law and U.S. foreign policy at the University of Southern California. Steve, first to you, if it does turn out that this is in fact a suicide bomber and it's looking that way, what's the bet that he was known, he was on some kind of list at some point, but then he kind of slipped through the cracks and he was not followed up, and this is the end result?
That's a good possibility, but it's not a foregone conclusion, because remember, they're not going to let their bomb makers die in suicide.
I'm just saying what I'm saying is that every time we had these attacks, 9 times out of 10, they knew the guy beforehand in some capacity.
Yes, and I get what you're saying there. What I'm saying is that occasionally you get a suicide bomber who has just been brought in, who's idealistic and has no record.
Okay.
Likely, though, they know him. And see, that's going to help the post-investigation, because if they've been watching him, they know everybody he's talked to. They probably have records on all of his digital communications. And right now, what they're doing is going to these places, going to these people, setting up taps on them, setting up surveillance, and there's a little bit of brinkmanship here. Do we want to go in and grab them, or do we want to see what they're going to do? And it's a risk that you really have to take sometimes.
And Lisa, carrying on with this working assumption that, as this U.S. law enforcement official says, it was probably a suicide bomber, the question has to be, was he homegrown? Did he come in from somewhere else? I mean, these are important questions for law enforcement and how you conduct the investigation going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And for years we've been saying, let's take lone wolf terrorism out of our vocabulary and jargon, because there's no such thing as lone wolf. Even if this individual was carrying this out alone, which is probably not the case, because this was a more sophisticated attack than we've seen. ISIS, and if it ends up being ISIS, Al-Qaeda, more so ISIS, has designed this do-it-yourself JIHADI 101 kit that you can really launch an attack from anywhere. And yes, are you alone? Are you doing this as a freelance attack, as you said before? No, because you have a network. You have a world of jihadis supporting you, whether it's on social media. And we talk about...
What about locally in Manchester?
In Manchester, there may be a local mosque or a community or just a group of friends who get together and do this. We've seen all the cases that I mentioned, that you see individuals that work alone with family members, and it takes months to track down each one of these individuals. Sometimes they're connected to other attacks within Europe. Sometimes they've come back from Syria or lived abroad and learned these tactics somewhere else. Sometimes we find that they were on a terror list and we overlooked it. It's always 2020 when we're looking back. But the point is that it's needle in a haystack, and that's the realization on a night like tonight, when you realize, you know, Twitter can take down 250,000 accounts like it did a few months ago. And the report came out, and should we applaud that, or should we say that's just the beginning? It's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many more, and for everyone that they take down, these jihadis put 10 more back up. So it's a very daunting task for law enforcement to go after these individuals. If they come onto a list, how can they be cleared? How can we, you know, we're supposed to detain everyone who comes under one of these lists. It's a very daunting task.
And Josh, just to bring you in, there has been no claim of responsibility yet, but the list of suspects out there is pretty short. This was straight out of the Jihadi Playbook 101, wasn't it?
Yes, this does appear to be a signature either ISIS or Al-Qaeda attack, John. I think what's important to note is, the initial focus in this investigation will be on forensics. ISIS, and especially what type of explosive was used here. ISIS in the past has used peroxide-based explosives. Al-Qaeda historically used ammonium-based explosives, but also, just underscoring what Lisa said, upward to 1,000 residents or citizens of the United Kingdom over the last few years have gone to Syria, and somewhere around a quarter of them have returned to the United Kingdom. So to the degree that they were radicalized abroad, and that we find in this investigation that the suspect, the perpetrator, and possibly a team that assisted him went abroad, it would likely be ISIS. But also in the same vein, Al-Qaeda has sought to, reclaim some of its mantle. We've seen Hamza bin Laden, Osama bin Laden's son, come out with an audio message in the last few weeks declaring for more attacks against the West. And the last attack, the 7/7 bombing, was obviously an Al-Qaeda inspired and plotted attack.
Steve, you want to chime in there?
Well, I agree with everything he said. I think what you're probably going to find in here is that this is probably a peroxide-based, maybe acetone triperoxide. Because I think it's ISIS because Al-Qaeda and ISIS have had some differences about targeting and whether you target people who are not combatants. And Al-Qaeda would be more reluctant, not completely reluctant, but would be more reluctant to hit women and children than ISIS would, as to whether they consider them the exact equal as far as targeting. Right. And as far as this explosive is concerned, yes, exactly. Al-Qaeda is using ammonium-based stuff, but I don't. The size of this explosion, based on how small the bomb would have to be, would lead me towards a peroxide base.
Steve, is there a specific role for U.S. counter-terrorist officials to play in this right now as it's unfolding in the UK?
There's going to be, because as Lisa said, the people who you're looking at are going to have communications with people all over the world. And there is a very robust counterterrorism group in the United States, including the NSA, who's monitoring things that are going on everywhere from Yemen to Aleppo to Raqqa. And we can help with we can help fill in some of the gaps.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, Lisa, as far as the messaging here, killing women and children at a concert.
They're infidels.
Yeah.
They're non-believers. They're kuffars. And that is what they're instructed to do, is to go after them. You become a shaheed, a martyr.
Because there's been some celebration online, right?
There's always some sort of follow-up. Now, whether or not they will claim responsibility, we'll have to wait. Usually it's within the 24-hour period. And if it's not, they will definitely jump on board to incite more attacks and piggyback on that, and to send that message to say, look at how this guy killed, X amount of people, you can do the same. The one thing I also wanted to point out here is that British authorities had put the security alert on severe. Yeah. That's a level 2, meaning they thought that it was highly probable that something was going to happen, and it still happened.
Likely but not imminent is
likely but not imminent. But they go. This is a full-time job to kill the infidel.
Yeah,
women, children, all the above.
Thank you.
Okay, Lisa and Steve and Josh.
We appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on this difficult evening. We appreciate it. We're going to take a quick break. We'll have much more on the deadly explosion in the United Kingdom straight ahead. Hala Grani picks up our live coverage from Manchester after the break.